All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all this morning to the SC Launch and Learn with Jerry Pilewski of Mission FocalPoint, based in Greenville, South Carolina. Today, we're discussing change management. But before we begin, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, if you can hear me, please raise your hand using the webinar controls. All right. So secondly, for the format of today's webinar, we will keep all audience audio muted, but we want this webinar to be very interactive. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, answers, please feel free to type those in using the webinar controls, and Jerry will be able to see that during the webinar. Thirdly, we have a couple of handouts for today's webinar. Jerry's going to be using the worksheet, so make sure you locate that and make sure you have access to that during the webinar. And lastly, we'll try to save some time for questions at the end for any final questions you have before we depart. And my name is Kelsey Davis, and I serve as the Communications Manager for the SCRA. And please join me in welcoming Jerry Pilewski. Jerry is one of our longtime research partners, and he will be covering change management and topics that include the types of change, how organizations change, the mechanisms for coping with change, the importance of personal resiliency, and why the struggle makes us stronger. Welcome, Jerry.
Huge thank you, Kelsey, and to the whole SCRA team, and really most importantly to all of you for sharing some of your valuable time with. Before we dive in, let me urge you to get the most out of today's workshop. So I ask you to be a little selfish for the next 45 minutes or so. Turn off your ringers, close the email box, be fully present. Today we're going to talk about managing change, as Kelsey said. Each of you received a companion worksheet that looks like so, and also it's in the handouts on the right side for GoToMeeting. If you open it as a PDF, it's form fillable. And if you print it out, it's also form fillable with your pen. You'll see that the worksheet follows along nicely with today's presentation. To help you track along, I'll include a symbol on the slide like so to let you know there's a corresponding question on the handout. Also, again, this is designed to be a participatory event. Ask questions using the type in question box or the chat box. Make comments. Most importantly, after today's session, take action. First, a note on what business coaches do. We help owners and executives navigate the waters of 4 basic topics: time, things like time management, balance, proper goal setting; team, attracting and retaining the right people, identifying and appropriately utilizing talent, creating positive, meaningful culture; profit, money is how we keep score in business. Money itself should never be the fundamental reason, but businesses exist to make a profit. Use your money wisely and make more of it. And strategy. Strategy is how we turn the purpose of passion into executable vision. It is the core responsibility of an owner. Today's topic has roots in all 4 of these categories. So, akin to a sports coach, my job is to push business leaders past what they can achieve on their own and hold them accountable through the process. Your job is to create an amazing product or service. My role is to team up with you and turn that into a thriving business. The methods used provide both immediate impact and lasting results. So again, I appreciate Kelsey's introduction, and there is a bio, but let me just share a little bit about who's on the other side of the microphone. Again, I'm Jerry Pilewski. I graduated with an engineering degree from the US Naval Academy and earned a master's which concentrated in complex organizational planning, budgeting, and operations. I served as a naval officer for over 2 decades, leading teams through training and combat over 6 continents. That experience led to a passion for service and helping others through difficult situations. You can bet that change management was a critical skill through that time. Battlefields have been replaced by boardrooms, but many of the same tools apply. I believe that highly intelligent people can amaze themselves with how much more they can accomplish when augmented with the right tools and just a little guidance. I serve now as a FocalPoint certified business coach. My 3 focus areas are business coaching, primarily to innovation economy entrepreneurs, executive leadership development for medium to large businesses, and the mentorship and support to fellow FocalPoint coaches. FocalPoint itself is an international training and coaching organization. The company is a recognized global leader in the area of peak performance training. We're composed of about 250 talented, highly diverse coaches who share a passion for helping others succeed. Additional certifications include executive leadership coaching, navigational conversations facilitation, and active within the South Carolina business ecosystem. Again, I'm a South Carolina Research Authority resource partner and SCMEP provider. Let me get your permission and make a promise. I'll stop a few times for questions and comments along the way. That interaction is critical to get the most out of this. We should work on things together. On me, I get excited about this stuff and can sometimes talk fast. Also, I'm a retired naval officer, so I tend to bring up a fair amount of nautical references. And I admit I own my overly punny dad humor. So those personality traits are going to be inherent to the way I facilitate. So I just want to check with you that it's okay for me to just be myself. Just give me a quick thumbs up, 10-4 or something in the chat box. Quite frankly, I also just want to make sure that you have the question in chat box up. Bring on the puns, thanks, yeah. All right, thanks Patricia. Julia, thank you. All right, good. Thanks, Giannis, thank you. Second, as a good way to manage time, there's gonna be a challenge. The challenge is that we only have a few minutes together today. We could run whole courses on managing change and its cousin, time management, and its ordinary sibling, managing stress. I'm going to present a lot of information today that should get your wheels turning, but we don't have time to fully flesh out the answers. In other words, there's a lot we could talk about. So rather than dive deep into each point, if it's okay with you to best manage our time together, can I hold off on how to get more information until later in our session? Again, I promise to circle back so you can learn where and how to find more support. If that's okay, again, just give a quick okay or sounds good in the chat box. Sounds good. William, thank you, Aaron. Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks, Taylor. All right. Today's topic is managing change. I wouldn't be a very good business coach if I didn't talk about our goals. Today, my goal is to provide you with tools and questions to increase your business performance. Our discussion will be based on significant research and exceptional content which has proven successful across every industry. My ask, allow myself to repeat myself. Take action. Focus on the items that are applicable to you right now. It's well and good to understand the concepts and identify the challenges. That work is for naught without taking action. That's where improvement lives. Let's start by identifying the problem. Especially for entrepreneurs, change is inevitable. Your very existence is a catalyst for change, and yet change is also scary. For those who are SERA companies, most of the audience, you are by definition posturing for significant change. All of you have amazing products intended to bring high-paying jobs and increase capital to the state. The goal for every SERA company should be to graduate beyond SERA. That means growing, and therefore growing pains. And growing pains can be, well, painful. Even the most mature companies attending this launch and learn are relatively young companies. So, almost by definition, owners are wearing more hats than is sustainable. Proactively managing change can often seem to be a far-off luxury that could only come at the cost of failing to simply manage to get through the day. Yeah, I need to keep the lights on. Even absent the challenges of the past year, many businesses, especially entrepreneurial ventures, are consumed with mere survival to the point where their short-term focus is, ironically, hurting their chances of conquering short-term challenges, much less plan for the future. The big idea is a simple one. You can become a master of change, or you can be a victim of change. When you've waited until the need for change is squarely upon you, it may be too late. You see, the most important single factor affecting your life today may very well be the rate of change, and that rate is ever increasing. In fact, you'll likely make more decisions affecting your life in 1 year than your grandparents did in their entire lifetime. The rate of change is not an option. How we deal with it is. The most effective men and women in every business are those who practice a series of methods, techniques, and strategies to deal with change that they cannot slow or even predict. When you learn and practice these same tools and techniques, you'll feel more positive, confident, and in control of every part of your life. So, today we'll warm up by talking about some of the inherent and unavoidable challenges of change. Being that I'm a coach, it means I like to turn challenges into opportunity. Given that this audience is full of company leaders, we'll look through the lens of organizational change. We'll highlight the vital and critical role you, as owners and leaders, have in that process. Then we'll translate from understanding the issue to working on its solution. Glaciers Formula for change will help in that process. Then we'll open the toolbox. It's not enough to simply acknowledge our role in change. We need to do something about it. I'll mention a couple of well-proven practices and then summarize many others using the 7 R's for change. These are the tools to become change's master. Finally, I'll call on you to take action. Without action, there can be no change, and without change, there can be no progress. Let's start talking about the challenges of change. Again, the rate of change may be the most important factor affecting your life now, tomorrow, for the indefinite future, for the rest of your life. It is inexorably tied to your happiness and success. You can be a master of change, or you can be a victim of change. You can be a creator of circumstances or a hapless creature of them. So, sorry, Billy Joel, we're going to take an active role today. In my prior profession, I did a lot of military strategic planning. It was our job to drive change, not merely hope for the best. In fact, one of our fundamental tenets was this: hope is not a strategy. There are 3 factors driving change. First, the continuing information explosion. Francis Bacon, known for his promotion of the scientific method, is sometimes referred to as the last universal scholar, as he had read every book that was in print. That was back in the early 1600s. By 2000, the total accumulated knowledge of mankind was doubling every 2 to 3 years. The accumulated information of mankind now doubles every few weeks or faster. Second, the technology explosion. While not quite as rapid as pure information, it is continuing at a rate that defies imagination. The third thing that's affecting our lives is competition. Woe be the entrepreneur who assumes their idea is truly novel without understanding the market competition. The rate of change can therefore be summarized as this: the rate of change equals knowledge times technology times competition. Jack Welch stated, if the rate of change outside your organization or outside yourself is greater than the rate of change inside your organization or self, then the end is in sight. Okay, Jack Welch's advice remains good and scary. Let me reference a classic. Frank Dupree's book, Metamorphosis, contains a story about a young boy who came across a butterfly cocoon and brought it home. For many hours, as the butterfly struggled to break free from its confinement, the boy watched. As the insect made a small hole in the cocoon, the boy could see that its body was too big to emerge from that small hole. It eventually tired and fell still. The boy was heartbroken. He wanted to help the butterfly. He used a scissor to expand the hole in the cocoon. The butterfly eventually emerged, but it was small and weak. Instead of flying away, it was only able to crawl on the ground. What happened? Why didn't the boy's assistants help the butterfly? Did his assistants constrain the butterfly's development? You see, for the butterfly's wings to develop properly, it did need to struggle through the process of emerging from the cocoon. The struggle would have made it stronger, and the strength was required for it to survive. So, struggle is not inherently bad, quite the opposite. The key is to struggle intelligently. Again, given this room is full of business owners, let me put this in the context of organizational change. All organizations undergo change. Organizational change as a practice should be deliberate and imbued into your culture. As owners, strategically planning for change is one of your core responsibilities. If you are not a change agent, why'd you start a business in the first place? So avoid this process at your peril. Think of once mighty organizations that failed to change and suffered the consequences. Blockbuster, BlackBerry, Kodak, Polaroid, Sears. A cool side note, your company should be on the lookout for these calcified entities. They represent market opportunity. Apply good change management and you can fill the gap. Here's the deal. The quicker you can embrace change, ironically, as a constant process, the better you will manage it. So let's talk about that proactive and positive process. I feel like we all kind of get that change is all around us and it's nice to do something about it. I bring up these next couple slides because no one is more responsible than you, owners in the audience, for driving change in your organization. Do not assume that because you're a startup full of energy that your entire team is on board. Let's walk through the difference between proactive and assumptive change management. When change is well managed, the process follows the top upward sloping line. It builds a culture of trust. When hope is the strategy, the lower downward sloping line is far more likely. The lower line is where trust goes to die, leading to unengaged, or in many cases, actively disengaged and damaging employees. So let's say a change announcement is made. If done so proactively, very quickly there's acceptance. The alternative is indifference. If people don't care about it, change happens, so what? Maybe I care, maybe I don't. In strong organizations, that acceptance grows into understanding. In weak ones, confusion. Strong organizations, that understanding then becomes adoption, what we think we become. In the weak organizations or the assumptive ones, that confusion becomes rejection. Well, this change is just stupid. Strong, that adoption becomes commitment. We're committed to the new idea, to the new change, and making it even better. Or your opportunity could be a refusal to cooperate. And to really drive the point home, let me share some data substantiated advantages for effective change management. With effective change management, you're 6 times more likely to achieve project goals, 5 times more likely to finish exactly on or before a deadline, and 2 times more likely to stay on or under budget. All of this equates to a more energizing place to work, greater retention, and of course, dramatically increased profit. Again, my point here is to take active steps beyond generally understanding that change matters. Let me better define that active role. Another way to label how you deal with change is coping. There are generally 2 types of coping. Now, my better half is a therapist, so I'm thinking she can elucidate these coping mechanisms far better than I. Just let me go over the basics. Escape coping. Escape is an action, but escape coping is not the type of activity I'm encouraging. It involves changing our behavior to avoid thinking about or feeling things that are uncomfortable. It doesn't really address the issue. Tact may be the better part of valor, but conflict avoidance is the evil harbinger of anxiety. When I say active coping, I mean tackling a problem head on. This approach is healthier because it reduces stress rather than avoiding it. In most cases, the fear of dealing with the thing is worse than the thing itself. Don't worry, you're in good company. We humans are wired to creatively imagine disaster. It's a safety mechanism. Ultimately, the most important thing we can do to cope with change in the workplace is to acknowledge it. Recognizing and accepting change is one of the first steps towards managing it. So let's talk about how we do this change thing. To establish and maintain competitive advantage, one must learn and apply new information faster than other people. Clarity is the key to competitive advantage. What is your purpose? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? Is it working? What are your assumptions? Too many entrepreneurs simply assume there is a market for their product or that the customers will buy their products versus someone else. Well, what if your assumptions are wrong? Once you have clarity for yourself or your organization, the next thing you want to do is communicate and enact the change you clearly see as important. A helpful construct to do this is Glaciers Formula for change. Applying this formula has the benefit of developing the culture of trust we talked about a couple slides ago. Rather than forcing change, you create progress. In this formula, change is possible when the level of dissatisfaction with the status quo, the clarity of vision for the future, and the grasp of first steps to be taken are greater than the existing resistance to change. Dissatisfaction. There must be some pain associated with current conditions. It's only when this dissatisfaction level is acknowledged at the conscious level, we'll call it a threshold, that the first momentum to change occurs. Next, there needs to be some vision or future focus that will take the person or organization forward out of the pain and towards something that is seen as rewarding or wanted. Then, establish first, concrete, definable steps needed to implement change. What is the first bite of the elephant? When all of these factors are multiplied by each other, the answer must be greater than the individual or organization's desire to change, referred to as the level of resistance. So look at the math. What happens when we multiply by 0? Well, nothing. That's the point here. If you have an awesome vision and a plan to achieve it, but no one is dissatisfied with the status quo, your vision will fall on deaf ears. If folks are clearly dissatisfied and you have a great vision, but the bridge is just too far to know where to start, you're dead in the water. You get the idea. Through the lens of selling, you can think of the dissatisfaction as the market gap or need. It matters not how awesome your product is if you cannot highlight some level of dissatisfaction in the life of your customer, and then make it easy for them to see how you will address that challenge. This formula applies to all change. Changes in policy, changes in structure, changes in your dinner plans. So, we've talked about the challenges of change and why it's critically important for you as owners. Glaciers Formula provides a helpful outline for how to do that. Next, we're going to cover some of the specific tools for change and change management, zero-based thinking, the theory of constraints, and the 7 R's for change. Those who've worked with me will recognize several of these tools from topics like time management, goal setting, and strategic planning. They're all very much related. So before I jump into the toolbox here, let me pause and see if you have any immediate questions or comments. Feel free to put them in the question and chat box. And Kelsey, I'm having an issue with the question box opening. Anything popping in?
I don't see anything.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on to how to handle this change thing. Change takes courage. The first tool we'll cover is zero-based thinking. It's a great cool tool for uncovering that D or dissatisfaction with Glaciers Formula for change. Focusing on what is most important involves constantly evaluating where we spend time and energy. It's a process of zero-based thinking. When we look at our jobs and our lives, the questions don't change. What are my goals? What do we do best? What's working? What isn't? What's holding us back? The answers change. In times of rapid change and turbulence, your answers are changing at a rapid rate as well. So if you look back at a year ago, your goals, your problems, your answers have changed. If you look back 6 months ago, they've changed again. Even 3 months ago or 3 weeks ago, your answers have changed and they continue to change. Zero-based thinking is the practice of constantly evaluating what you do and why you do it in order to make sure it is still relevant, important, and key to achieving your goals. Ask yourself, knowing what I know now, would I start this up again if I had to do it over? Hindsight is 20/20. Use it as a crystal ball for the future. If the answer is no, I would not do that thing again, then ask, well, why am I still doing it? How could I change it? Do I need to eliminate it altogether? And if the answer is yes, cheerio, keep doing it. It's working, continue to evaluate. Here's a way to highlight the importance of zero-based thinking. What percentage of your business decisions do you think will turn out to be wrong in the fullness of time? Any guesses? Please put them in the chat box. I want to see guesses here. What percentage of your business decisions do you think will turn out to be wrong in the fullness of time? 35%. Emily says 20. 25%. Giannis, thank you. So a bunch of the audience thinks somewhere around a quarter to a third of your decisions. Well, according to the American Management Association, fully 70% of your business or management decisions will turn out to be wrong in the fullness of time. How? This is because when you made the decision, it was a good one, based on information you had at the time. But now, the information and the situation have changed. What was at one time a good decision is no longer a good decision and must be changed or even abandoned. Apply this to yourself and your business. Knowing what you know now, are there any people decisions you wouldn't make over again? Perhaps promotions, hiring decisions, partnerships. Are there any investments you wouldn't make? Money, time, emotional. If you're beginning to experience stress because of something you wouldn't get into again, the question is, how do you get out of it and how fast? Be willing to admit the mistake, cut your losses, and move on. Stat. You know what? Before we go on, I'm going to ask you to be a little bit vulnerable. So, given your current knowledge, what is something you'd not do over? Take a moment and type your answers into the question mark box or the chat box. I'd like to know from the audience, apply zero-based thinking to yourself right now. And this is more fun when I'm in person with groups because I will stare at you until you answer. Someone share with me something they wouldn't do if they knew what they knew now. Is everyone's business perfect? The thing I might change is asking people to write their vulnerable answers into the question box. Oh, partnership decision. Yeah, that's a good one. Any others? Anyone willing to share? Very private audience. All right, we'll move on to the next tool of critical constraints. This is one of the great thinking tools. This tool is particularly good for identifying first steps that need to be taken. I'll give you a second to read this. For every goal, there is a limiting factor or constraint that determines how fast the job gets done. As aptly pointed out by the stanza from Admiral Hopwood's Laws of the Navy, your chain is only as strong as your weakest link. You can only succeed as fast as your most critical constraint will allow you. If you have 10 things to do to complete a project and you're excellent and efficient at 9, but slow and inefficient at the 10th sets a pace. The best way to speed up is not to get better at the other 9, but to become faster and more efficient at the 10th. One of the keys to effectiveness is to identify the limiting factor, choke point, or bottleneck that determines the speed at which you complete a task. You can make more progress towards your goals by removing or alleviating this constraint than you can by doing any other single task or activity. To identify your constraint, you must first determine your goal with absolute clarity. You cannot plan a route without knowing the destination, and you cannot remove roadblocks until you know the road. Your constraint must identify that one factor that sets the speed at which you achieve your goal. Here's where a little self-responsibility comes into play. In general, of all of the things holding you back, 80% are under your control. That applies both on a personal level and on a company level. Third, you must focus all of your time and energy on alleviating that single constraint. Maybe a step requires you to obtain additional training or expertise. Maybe you've outsourced something to an unreliable vendor. Maybe too many people are involved. Your ability to identify and define your critical constraint and find a way to alleviate it will be the critical factor determining your success and at the speed at which you reach that success. So you may love the research, but get bogged down in organizing the footnotes. Maybe your day is structured in such a way that you bounce between activities too much. Maybe you need to better understand regulatory environments for your product. Maybe you need to accept and find that other people in the organization are better suited for certain tasks. Bring them into your organizational change process. At the risk of the shy audience, I will ask, is anyone willing to share a critical constraint in their organization that they need to attack? You can put those in the question or chat box. All right, well, we'll go into some more tools. Let me go over the 7 R's for change. You see, these are all re words. We're talking about change. Things are being redone one way or the other. We'll chat a few seconds about each, and you'll see there's overlap in these. That's okay. Reorganize. Reorganization goes on continually. It's part of intelligent design. Reorganization means getting more done with less resources. You may have heard the adage, better, faster, cheaper, pick 2. That's a bit of a cop-out. Don't turn yourself into a commodity. You can and should strive to have all 3. Reorganization requires finding ways to increase outputs relative to inputs or costs. You should always be looking for greater efficiency, not at the cost of quality or safety, but as a result of increased knowledge from experience. Perhaps the order of steps or who completes each one. Restructure. The good friend of reorganization, restructuring means moving people and money and resources closer to the activities customers most value. The Pareto rule states that 80% of your sales come from 20% of the things you do. Restructuring means you constantly move resources forward to higher value activities. Restructuring is the enemy of that's how we've always done things. It can also compete with ego. The management guru Peter Drucker gives myriad examples of products entrepreneurs thought were good, but the market didn't want them. But ego, be it institutional or individual, often puts good people on these low-value activities. Re-engineer. Re-engineering starts with process analysis. The word of the day is simplification. Make a list of every step within a process. Look for ways to reduce the number of steps and get the same result. Look for ways to eliminate and consolidate steps. Reduce the number of people involved. One way to look at this is to call it time compression by responsibility expansion. Perhaps your people are over-specialized. This is about the need for speed. What could you do to dramatically reduce the amount of time it takes to get the result for your customer without sacrificing quality? All too often, steps which started with good reason become a product unto themselves. Do you fill out 7 copies of TPS reports? Reinvent. Reinventing means imagine starting your work over. Imagine your business was burned down, but everyone survived. Across the street, there's a new office or facility that's available for you to walk straight into. How could you reinvent your company? Think of processes, layout, customers, etc., the works. Whether or not you have a red swing line stapler, this is a mental exercise you should complete about every 6 months. What should you do more of, less of, start doing, and more importantly, what activities should you stop altogether? Reevaluate. Reevaluate your situation regularly based on the latest information, the latest feedback, and the latest discoveries. I mentioned BlackBerry before. They refused to accept the new market for app-running smartphones. They went from market dominator to nearly extinct within 5 years of the iPhone's introduction. Whatever got you to where you are is not enough to keep you going. Or, if you sense you're in a bind, whatever led you to trouble will not be the thing to lead you out of it. Could there be a better way? Perhaps there's a new fishbowl. Rethink. Rethinking may be the hardest job of all. It often requires that you abandon your old assumptions, and one can easily be emotionally attached to those assumptions. The winter dog pictured here is wise to abandon the assumption that he should bark at strangers. The mark of leaders, like yourself, is that leaders don't allow themselves to get stuck in a comfort zone. Rethinking is especially useful in times of turbulence, like, I don't know, maybe a global pandemic. Superior people are always saying, what if I was completely wrong? Refocus. Finally, refocusing is a source of personal and organizational power. Make a new commitment to a new course of action. 3 final keys in success in managing change. First, the more you can practice constant and never-ending improvement, the better you'll become. This is the process many know by the Japanese Kaizen. Second, continuous training and personal improvement is key. You should strive to invest 1 to 2 hours every day on yourself. As a business, no less than about 3% should be spent on programs designed to improve. The final key to mastering change is speed. One of my old captains had a saying, haste makes crap. So speed does not merely mean going faster. Speed means developing a sense of urgency. If you have a good idea, act on it. If you have an opportunity, move on it. If you have a problem, solve it quickly. Do it now. So we touched on a lot of things pretty rapidly here in the last half hour, and there's plenty more depth behind every topic and how to do it. So I promised at the beginning I'd tell you how to learn more. Today's discussion was distilled from my coaching and training catalog. I and all FocalPoint coaches pride ourselves in tailoring programs to the individual. Several SERA companies have enjoyed success as a result of this approach. Specific to SERA, I've developed a family of programs that aligns well with your major gates or milestones. The Entrepreneurial Growth Course is for newer companies, either to SERA or trying to join SERA. It's a 3-month group program that covers the fundamental tenets of business. Clarity Bootcamp aligns well with companies who received an acceleration grant or initial investment. It is a one-on-one 3-month program which results in validation of your business and a living business plan. Completion means you should be able to confidently present to an SERA board or outside investors for follow-on capital. Business Plan Intensive is a 6-month course that dives deeper in your business, helps you build the organization to scale. It's designed for those who are about to hire several employees, preparing for larger investments such as Series A venture round, or are working to grow revenue enough to not sacrifice equity. So regardless of where you are, none of these programs are calcified. We work together to create a program that makes sense for your individual business. To get a feel for what's offered, download the pictured catalog. There's a link in the worksheet, post-webinar survey, and my website. And feel free to reach out anytime at missionfocalpoint.com. Email me or find me, Jerry Pilewski, on LinkedIn. Let's talk about your business aspirations and see if it makes sense to work together. Back to change. Today, we didn't have time to dive deep into each of these tools, but we did talk enough to get the ball rolling. So describe your thoughts about your organization, if and how it's changing. What changes have you experienced recently? And how have you adapted to change throughout your career? Most importantly, what did you learn during this 45 minutes or so that will impact your ability to adapt and change? We talked about being a master and not a victim of change. Organizational change is absolutely driven predominantly by the CEO, the owner. When you do change, a good way to make sure that you're doing organizational change and active versus escape coping is to use the formula for change. Identify the dissatisfaction, come up with a clearer vision, make the first steps easy and doable for everyone, and all of that must be greater than the resistance to change. And then finally, we talked about several tools for managing change, like zero-based thinking, critical constraints, and the 7 R's. The final step is the call to action. There's homework listed on the worksheet after question number 6. Circle back to this lesson and apply the tools. For example, what are the 20% of your tasks that represent 80% of your value? What are 3 things that, knowing what you know now, you wouldn't start up again if you could do it over? This is my challenge to you. Take an honest look and answer those questions as a first step in moving forward. And reach out to let me know how you're doing. So I thank you again for your time. It's hugely a great honor to be with SCRA, and I open it up to any questions or comments.
Jerry, it looks like we had one that said, what is CANI?
Oh, continuous and never-ending improvement, otherwise known as Kaizen to the Toyota crowd, but committed to constantly getting better.
Are there any more questions? Jerry, it looks like we had one come in that says, I'm a big fan of Linda and Dean Anderson's change management. What other resources might you recommend to learn more in depth about change management?
That's a great question. That is a good one too, but a lot of change management, like I said, is really fundamentally about strategic planning and the overall foundations of your business. So there are change management books, a million of them out there, but I really recommend diving into the focus of your business first. So on a personal level, I always go to the old school classic of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which the cheat sheet of it is to identify your major definite purpose in life. Simon Sinek made that popular by saying start with why. So that's my key to change. Is the key to change is clarity first. So Brian Tracy has a lot of great books on that, and I'm happy to reach offline if there's specific questions and point down a different path for various authors out there.
And it looks like we've had a couple more come in. What would be the best way to decide where to begin change when there are so many changes needed?
Yes, so the question is, basically, how do you determine what that first step is? I'll answer like a lawyer. It depends. So it depends on what the thing is you're trying to solve. So the first thing is, when the heck am I trying to solve? So is it a process? Is it my ability to sell? Is it the overall company? And then depending on what that thing is, looking at those various tools, the 7 R's or zero-based thinking, different tools apply to different things. So I hesitate to provide a blanket answer to that question, but I will recycle back around to say, before any of it is clarity of vision. So it's identify where you are, where you're going, and then we'll figure out how to get there. That's oversimplified, but it's very true every single case. No sense in changing unless you know where you are and where you want to go first.
It looks like we had another one come in too, Jerry. It says, could you please give a clear definition of zero-based thinking? Want to ensure I'm clear.
All right, well, again, zero-based thinking is a way to get rid of activities that are no longer providing you value. So the assumption is that you are doing something and it is no longer the most efficient. So when you made that decision, like I said, it was a good decision to do a process, do a procedure, hire a certain vendor, promote someone. But as time went on, you realized that wasn't the best decision anymore. Or maybe you went into a different market that really isn't providing any sort of revenue. So zero-based thinking is simply giving a very honest look and saying, not judging yourself for the decision that was made, but saying, knowing what I know now, if I could start it over again, having that prescience, would I do it? And if the answer is no, stop doing it. Now, sometimes you might be caught into something like a contract or, some long-term arrangement. So the question is, how do I get out of that arrangement, that decision as fast as possible? Does that answer the question? That's interesting. I apologize. I am not seeing the questions come up clearly on my side.
Okay, I haven't seen any more come in, Jerry. Does anyone have any final questions before we depart? Oh, and the question asker said that answered their question. So thank you, Jerry.
Oh, perfect. Yep.
Alrighty, I don't see anything else coming in, but you all are going to receive a survey after the webinar has closed today. So please feel free to take that out to fill that out and include any feedback you have. The webinar is also going to be posted on our SC Launch and Learn page later today, and we will email this link to you this afternoon, so you can refer back to this presentation if you'd like at any time. And thank you again for attending. And Jerry, did you have any final comments before we depart?
No, I just want to say thank you again, and I greatly appreciate what everyone in this room does as entrepreneurial venture folk. I truly believe that small, medium businesses run with integrity are the engine room to a sustainable society. So I'm excited for what you do, happy to help, and just I thank you for your service.
Awesome. Have a great afternoon, everyone.